It began on a rain-soaked night in Manhattan, when an envelope with no return address arrived at Nero Wolfe's brownstone, sealed with crimson wax, and carrying the faint scent of lilies and death. Inside lay a single sheet of paper, yellowed at the edges, and 3 words scrawled in hurried ink. "The testament lives." By morning, the papers would speak of a dying heiress, a missing will, and a fortune cursed by its own bloodline. But for Wolfe and Archie Goodwin, the case would become far more than a question of inheritance. It would be a contest of wit, greed, and deception, where every word left unsaid could mean the difference between justice and murder. Some secrets, after all, refuse to stay buried. If you enjoy unraveling minds darker than midnight and mysteries sharper than a razor's edge, then subscribe, share, and join the investigation. Because every clue counts. And the next case might be closer than you think. Chapter 1: The Heiress Shadow. The first drizzle of November fell softly upon New York City, leaving the streets slick and reflective, as though the entire metropolis were hesitant to reveal the secrets it held. Gas lamps shimmered against the dark brick facades of Midtown, casting shadows that slithered like living things. At 33 West 35th Street, the brownstone of Nero Wolfe rose with imposing dignity, a citadel of intellect. Its windows, tall and narrow, looked more like the eyes of a watchful sphinx than a home, and within, the scent of aged books mingled with the faint perfume of orchids that bloomed despite the chill outside. Archie Goodwin, Wolfe's loyal chronicler and streetwise right-hand man, was finishing his rounds in the office, arranging the day's mail with absent-minded precision, when a knock came at the door. Not a polite knock, not tentative, but insistent, almost trembling. Archie glanced at Wolfe, who was already half rising from his chair, a signal that the visitor would be unusual. "Come in," Wolfe called, his voice calm but laced with authority. The door opened to reveal a young woman, slender and impeccably dressed, yet her posture hinted at a fatigue that had nothing to do with the weather. Veronica Latham, the sole heiress of the Latham fortune, entered with a controlled grace. Her dark eyes, bright and calculating, surveyed the office with the kind of precision that suggested a mind accustomed to scrutiny and suspicion. Her cheeks were pale, her lips pressed in a thin, almost imperceptible line. "Mr. Wolfe," she began, her voice steady but carrying an undertone of urgency. "I have come because I am dying, and I fear that my death will not come quietly." Archie raised an eyebrow. He had heard many clients claim danger, but the sincerity in Veronica's gaze was undeniable. Wolfe, seated behind his enormous, cluttered desk, steepled his fingers and regarded her silently. "Threats do not interest me," Wolfe said slowly. "But motives, intentions, and opportunities do. If your life is in danger, then it is the pattern of danger, not the mere fact of it, that matters. Speak, Miss Latham. What is the nature of this threat?" Veronica took a small, ornate envelope from her handbag and placed it on the desk. The seal bore the Latham family crest, a phoenix rising from ashes, meticulously embossed in gold. Wolfe broke the seal himself, and unfolded the testament within. The will was unusual. Assets were distributed to distant relatives, obscure charities, and a mysterious figure identified only as the keeper. The instructions were precise, but also puzzling, a series of contingencies that would come into effect only under conditions that seemed designed to confuse anyone but the most careful observer. Archie, leaning casually against the doorway, commented, "The keeper? That's cryptic. Sounds more like a secret society than a will." Wolfe made a subtle gesture, dismissing Archie's commentary. "It is in the ambiguities that danger hides. A name alone can be a shield or a weapon. Observe the document as a whole, Archie. Every line, every signature, every shift of the letterhead is a potential clue." Veronica spoke again, her tone dropping into a softer register, almost confidential. "I have received threats, letters, phone calls. They do not wish for me to die by chance. They wish to prevent this will from being executed. And yet I do not know their identity." Wolfe's sharp gaze did not waver. "And you have come to me because you believe I can discern the patterns invisible to the casual observer. Very well. Tell me everything, the letters, the calls, the people who would gain from your death." Heiress hesitated only for a fraction of a second. Then she recounted a series of events, a letter left in her morning post, unsigned, with a single line written in charcoal. You cannot escape the consequences of your inheritance. A phone call at precisely 8:03 p.m. the night before, with a voice that had been altered to sound almost like her own mother's. A stranger she had glimpsed in the corner of a cafe, observing her with interest that had nothing to do with casual curiosity. Archie took notes with the practiced eye of a journalist accustomed to subtle threats, but Wolfe's mind was already working, mapping connections, weighing motives, and calculating probabilities. As Veronica rose to leave, Wolfe examined a small anomaly, a single, black feather that had slipped from the envelope onto the desk. He lifted it carefully, inspected its barbs, its minute phrase, its unusual density. Not a simple threat, he murmured. A signature, deliberate and unmistakable. Someone wants the message delivered with style. And I suspect they will make their move soon. Veronica paused at the door. Mr. Wolfe, I trust you to protect my final wishes. I am placing my life, and my legacy, in your hands. Wolfe inclined his head slightly. We shall see, Miss Latham. We shall see. Once the door closed, Wolfe sat back, hands steepled again, eyes narrowing. Archie, he said, the game has begun. And in every game of this sort, the devil hides in the minutiae. Archie, already anticipating the coming chaos, smiled wryly. So another dance with death and money, huh? Wolfe did not smile. A dance with intellect, my dear Archie. The rest merely follows. Outside, the drizzle intensified, the city reflecting every flicker of gaslight in its wet streets. Somewhere in Manhattan, the shadow of danger moved, as silent and patient as the detective about to confront it. Chapter 2: The Circle of Suspects. The morning fog had not yet lifted from the streets of Manhattan when Archie Goodwin left Wolfe's brownstone. The city was quiet, almost contemplative, but Archie knew better. Danger seldom announced itself with courtesy. His task was simple in description, but treacherous in practice. Investigate those closest to Veronica Latham, discover who might wish her harm, and report everything back to Wolfe, whose mind was already assembling the invisible threads into a tapestry of logic. Archie's first stop was Harold Latham, Veronica's uncle, and the appointed executor of the family estate. The mansion perched high on Riverside Drive, its stone facade looming like a fortress. Archie entered the grand hall, noting the imported Persian rugs, the massive portraits of Latham ancestors, and the subtle air of expectation, every element carefully curated to impress or intimidate visitors. Harold greeted Archie with the ease of a man accustomed to control, but his eyes betrayed unease. Ah, Goodwin. I understand you're investigating concerns regarding my niece. Yes, Archie said, letting his gaze drift across the room. I need to know everyone who has access to Miss Latham's will and her personal affairs. Any disputes, quarrels, or unusual relationships. Harold's lips pressed together. Unusual, perhaps, in the sense of eccentricities. Veronica is a peculiar young woman, yes, but dangerous? I cannot imagine. Our family has always respected the rules of conduct. Archie noted the subtle twitch of Harold's left eye as he mentioned Veronica's eccentricities. It was tiny, almost imperceptible, yet unmistakable to a trained observer. He filed it away. From there, Archie visited Camille St. James, Veronica's confidant and companion. Camille's townhouse was an elegant, understated apartment in the Upper East Side. She received Archie with a smile that was warm in appearance but calculated, the kind of smile that carefully measured reaction before displaying emotion. I am concerned for Veronica, Camille said, glancing at Archie as if reading the questions before they were asked. She has been receiving threats, letters, phone calls. I am doing everything in my power to protect her. Archie observed the fine gloves she wore indoors, the expensive yet restrained jewelry, and the weight of a purse that seemed heavier than necessary. Each detail suggested preparation, forethought, or concealment. Mississippi St. James, he said casually. If someone wanted to prevent the execution of Veronica's will, they might target the document, or her life. Anyone come to mind? Camille's eyes flickered momentarily. Only those with means and motive. I cannot imagine anyone with both is foolish enough to act openly. Archie left, file notes, filling his mind with possibilities, motives, and questions. Yet Wolfe's voice echoed in his thoughts. Observe the document in its totality, not in isolation. Danger hides in subtlety. Archie returned to Wolfe's brownstone, where the detective was already examining the black feather left in the office by Veronica's arrival. Wolfe's brow was furrowed in thought as he traced the barbs under a magnifying lens. Notice, Archie, Wolfe said. This is no ordinary feather. The pattern, density, and microscopic damage suggest a rare black pheasant, not native to this city, not available without specific, deliberate channels. This is a signature, a calling card. Someone went to a lot of trouble, Archie said. Indeed. And the effort tells us more than the threat itself. The individual wants recognition. Pride, vanity, or some other human folly is their weapon. Over the next 2 days, Wolfe dispatched Archie on a series of discreet errands. He visited pawnshops, rare bird collectors, and obscure exotic markets in Brooklyn and Queens, all under the guise of casual business. Each visit brought Archie closer to the edges of the secret world that could provide such a feather. Simultaneously, Wolfe studied the will itself. Its design was unconventional, almost cryptographic. The letterhead had been meticulously embossed with the Latham crest, but Wolfe noted subtle differences between copies. Certain lines of the text bore minute deviations in spacing and punctuation. A forger, he said to himself. Amateur yet daring. That night Archie reported his findings. Camille had access to rare feathers, perhaps inherited or borrowed. Harold had motive and opportunity to forge a will. Both were suspects, but Wolfe emphasized the need to examine patterns, timing, and human psychology. Archie, Wolfe murmured, lighting a cigar. Observe the map of human desire. It is a city more treacherous than the streets outside. In it, we navigate not by footprints, but by intention. As they spoke, Wolfe's gaze drifted to the window overlooking the street. The fog had thickened, and in it, a shadow moved, deliberately, silently. He did not speak, but the tension hung in the room like incense. The game was unfolding, and Wolfe, as always, was already 3 moves ahead. Chapter 3. The Will is Contested. The city had grown colder, the November wind cutting through the streets like a silent blade. Archie's boots clicked sharply on the wet pavement as he returned to Wolfe's brownstone that morning, carrying news that would thrust the case into sudden urgency. Wolfe, Archie said, stepping into the office. It's worse than I thought. Miss Latham, she's fallen into a coma. Wolfe's eyes, calm and calculating as ever, did not flicker. He drew a thin line of smoke from his cigar, watching it curl upward in the dim lamplight. Predictable, he murmured. Not the event itself, but the timing. It is a common tactic. Immobilize the source of authority and seize the advantage. Archie, we must consider the will under immediate threat. The phone rang, shrill against the low hum of the office. Wolfe gestured for Archie to answer. A lawyer's anxious voice confirmed Archie's fears. A group of relatives, emboldened by Veronica's incapacitation, had filed suit to contest the will. The legal vultures had gathered, each one eager to rewrite the rules to their advantage. Observe, Archie, Wolfe said. The machinations of greed are rarely subtle. But it is subtlety in contrast that will reveal the truth to us. By mid-afternoon, Wolfe and Archie arrived at the Latham estate. The mansion, usually a silent monument to lineage, was now a theater of tension. Lawyers paced the halls, families whispered in corners, and servants exchanged nervous glances. Outside, the fog lay heavy, pressing against the windows like an uninvited audience. Wolfe's attention, however, was drawn to minutiae, the placement of portraits, the slight scuff of a rug, and most importantly, the copy of the will held by the contesting relatives. He scrutinized it carefully, noticing a tiny anomaly. The Latham family crest, which should have been perfectly centered on the letterhead, was shifted 2 millimeters to the left. A subtle difference, almost imperceptible to the casual observer, but a glaring red flag to Wolfe. This, he said quietly to Archie, is the work of someone clever enough to mimic the form but careless enough to overlook precision. A forgery, designed to appear authentic until close examination reveals its flaws. Archie frowned. So the Will's contested version isn't the real one? Precisely. And the person responsible for the forgery is no fool, but neither are they infallible. Everyone leaves a signature, Archie, whether in handwriting, timing, or attention to detail. And we shall find it. Wolfe convened a private session with the household staff and family members, employing his classic, intimidating interrogation style. Each suspect was called individually, their reactions noted, recorded in Archie's meticulous shorthand. Harold Latham, the uncle, insisted upon propriety but exhibited telltale signs of unease, sweaty palms, rapid blinking, and evasive answers. Camille St. James, the confidante, presented herself with composed grace, yet her fingers fidgeted with the ring, twisting it in a manner suggesting nervous calculation. Even the household lawyer seemed overeager to provide his own version of events, perhaps hoping to curry favor with the ambitious relatives. After hours of questioning, Wolfe retired to his study, where the orchids thrived in the low November light. "Observe, Archie," he said. "The grand picture. There are two types of deception, the overt, intended to mislead the casual observer, and the covert, hidden in plain sight. We must find the latter." Archie nodded, though he remained unconvinced he could detect subtle shifts as Wolfe did. Yet, Wolfe's method was already in motion. He sent Archie on another investigation, to trace the rare black pheasant feather through collectors and exotic markets in the city, and to discreetly observe the interactions between Harold, Camille, and the household staff. That evening, Wolfe reflected over a plate of his carefully prepared dinner, sipping a glass of amber-colored brandy. The city outside had fallen silent, the fog now so thick it seemed to absorb sound. And yet, Wolfe sensed movement within the walls of human ambition. He knew the forged will was only the beginning, the initial ripple in a series of actions that would lead to revelation, or disaster. "Archie," Wolfe said finally, "the key to this puzzle lies not in the document itself, but in those who fear its power. Observe them. Measure them. And remember, in a contest of intellects, it is the smallest details, the microseconds of hesitation, the tiniest shift in a line of type, that betray the grandest designs." As they left the mansion, Archie could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon them. Somewhere, someone was watching, waiting for a misstep. The fog thickened, and with it, the sense that the stakes had grown immeasurably higher. Chapter 4: The Keeper Revealed. The November wind had grown bitter, slashing down narrow Manhattan streets and rattling windows in the brownstone. Inside, Wolfe's office was a sanctuary of warmth and order, the air thick with cigar smoke and the faint perfume of orchids. Archie sat opposite Wolfe, files and notes spread across the desk like battlefield maps. "Archie," Wolfe said, tapping a finger on the envelope Veronica had left behind. "We have observed the misdirection, the forged will, the feather, the nervous glances, but the true architect remains obscured. Our next step is to identify the singular variable that ties all these threads together." Archie leaned back, exhausted but alert. "And you think that's the keeper?" Wolfe's eyes glimmered. "Precisely. The one who exists outside the obvious motives, the one whom the greedy and ambitious cannot predict or manipulate. Find him, and the puzzle resolves itself." Archie's search led him to the dim streets of the West Village, where history clung to the brick facades and shadows gathered like old friends. There, behind an unassuming door, he discovered James Mallory, a retired archivist whose hands were as precise as Wolfe's, whose eyes shone with quiet intelligence. Mallory's apartment was a testament to meticulous order, books stacked floor to ceiling, rare manuscripts displayed like trophies, and a faint scent of cedar lingering in the air. He greeted Archie with a small, knowing smile. "You are the one they call the keeper," Archie said bluntly, sensing immediately the man's calm authority. Mallory's eyes twinkled. "A title, a label, is often misleading. Miss Latham trusted me with matters far beyond mere inheritance. She understood that some truths are fragile, too delicate to place in the hands of the ambitious or the greedy." Archie, always practical, asked, But why her will? Why all this secrecy? Because, Mallory said, selecting a delicate manuscript and placing it under careful glass, the will is more than money. It is a cipher of intentions. Miss Latham's wealth was a test of character, and her enemies, both expected and unexpected, would reveal themselves when challenged. Meanwhile, Wolfe's investigation had uncovered a telling fact. The black pheasant feather, originally presumed to be a random threat, was traced to Camille St. James. Years prior, Mallory had lent her part of his rare bird collection for study. The feather, a calling card in her staged intimidation, betrayed her attempt to manipulate fear and control outcomes. The puzzle fell into place with elegant precision. Harold Latham, greedy and impatient, had forged a version of the will in hopes of redirecting the fortune. Camille, loyal in appearance but opportunistic, attempted to manipulate events using misdirection. And all along, the real executor of Veronica's strategic design, the Keeper, had been observing quietly, waiting for human folly to reveal itself. Archie returned to Wolfe's brownstone with a detailed report, the interconnections, the motives, the red herrings, and the one figure whose actions had remained calm, deliberate, and almost invisible. Wolfe, reviewing the files, leaned back in his chair, eyes half closed. "Observe, Archie," he murmured. "The elegant symmetry of human folly. The ambitious overreach. The clever attempt at deception. And the one individual who remains untouched, because he acts not from greed, but from understanding. That is the Keeper." The revelation was a triumph of intellect. Wolfe had not only identified the central figure of the conspiracy, but also traced the subtle manipulations that had endangered Veronica's life. The strands of deceit, the forged will, the staged threats, the hidden motives, were untangled and laid bare, ready for the final confrontation. Outside, Manhattan's fog had lifted slightly, revealing the city in a pale, ghostly light. Wolfe and Archie prepared to return to the Latham estate. There, the climactic confrontation would take place, the unmasking of Camille, the exposure of Harold's forgery, and the vindication of Veronica Latham's last testament. Chapter 5: Resolution and Witty Flourish. The Latham estate, perched high above Riverside Drive, was quiet now, though tension crackled beneath the surface. Wolfe had summoned all principal players, the nervous relatives, the elegant Camille St. James, and Harold Latham, to the grand drawing room, a chamber lined with centuries of family portraits, the walls echoing secrets long buried. Archie stood near the doorway, notebook in hand, observing the interactions with a reporter's eye, while Wolfe, seated behind a small table with the will in front of him, radiated a calm authority that made every lie tremble under scrutiny. "Ladies and gentlemen," Wolfe began, his voice measured and precise, "you are all here because human ambition is rarely discreet. Some of you would manipulate, deceive, or even threaten to secure fortune. And yet, the truth is rarely as complex as one might imagine. It is simple, elegant, and unavoidable, if one knows where to look." He lifted the original will, the paper crisp and meticulously signed. "This document is the only authentic testament of Miss Veronica Latham. Every other version submitted for consideration has been examined and found wanting. Let me explain why." Wolfe turned first to Camille St. James, who sat rigidly, her gloves twisting nervously in her lap. "You, Mississippi St. James, received the black pheasant feather from a collection lent to you years ago by Mr. James Mallory. You intended it as a threat, to instill fear, to manipulate outcomes in your favor. Yet it betrayed you, because the feather is rare, distinctive, and traceable. Pride and vanity led you to leave your signature, however subtle, on every stage of your scheme." Camille's composure faltered. I only wanted to protect her," she protested. Wolfe's brow did not twitch. "Protection is a noble intention, but when executed through deception, it becomes complicity." Next, Wolfe addressed Harold Latham, the uncle. "And you, sir, forged a copy of the will, shifting the Latham crest slightly to the left, believing such a minute alteration would escape notice. Greed is always detectable in microcosm, Harold. 2 millimeters, a detail invisible to most, but not to the trained eye of observation." Harold flushed crimson, unable to maintain his earlier arrogance. Finally, Wolfe spoke of the only person who had acted not from greed, fear, or vanity, but from foresight, James Mallory, the mysterious keeper. He was entrusted with Miss Latham's confidences, and his actions ensured that the will would be executed according to her intentions. Calm, precise, and invisible, he is the fulcrum upon which this puzzle rested. Mallory inclined his head modestly. I only acted as she would have wished. The rest is a study in human nature. Archie, always ready with a wry observation, leaned toward Wolfe. So the heiress played them all. And we're just here to watch? Wolfe allowed a rare, thin smile. Observe, Archie, crime is often messy, but intellect, careful, patient, and relentless, will always prevail. The smallest detail is the one that unravels the grandest scheme. And in this case, it was feathers, millimeters, and subtle hesitation. The legal representatives, once tense and overbearing, now sat in stunned silence as Wolfe recounted the evidence, step by step, tracing the web of deception with the precision of a master chess player. Each lie, each attempt at manipulation, had been anticipated, observed, and catalogued. By the end of the evening, the Latham fortune was safe. Veronica Latham's wishes were preserved exactly as she had intended, and the conspirators had been exposed without violence, without spectacle, and without error. As Archie and Wolfe returned to their brownstone, the night air crisp and carrying the distant hum of the city, Archie finally allowed himself a grin. Another one solved, Nero. The heiress dies, the villains squirm, and we still get to eat dinner in peace. Wolfe chuckled softly. Peace, Archie, is always provisional. But intellect, observation, and patience, those endure. And somewhere in the city, unseen, the fog swirled, carrying whispers of human ambition and folly, while Nero Wolfe and Archie Goodwin, the eternal observers of such patterns, settled into the calm certainty that comes from seeing the invisible and unraveling the impossible.